It is now day 80 of our 2020 Focus Bible reading. That is around the New Testament in 80 days. We are on Matthew chapter 23, and I think that there's 40 days. That's an important number in the Bible, and so 80 days. You've doubled that. So way to go, keep going. We are in Matthew chapter 23, and this is what we read. It says, Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels of their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. But you have neglected the more important matters of law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgent. Blind Pharisees! First, clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in the shedding of the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that had been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come on this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. All right, so obviously a light and cheery chapter. Really great. I think you should definitely make this bedtime reading for your kids. This is a really heavy chapter. Jesus is loading on the people who've rejected him. And he is not doing so in kind words at all. There is an edge to this. It does give rise to, it gives kind of explanation to why these Pharisees and religious leaders weren't too keen on Jesus and why they were really turning up their plot to get rid of him. Because he is just taking it to him. He is not stopping, and he is just, he is going after him, and he's doing so publicly. It is quite the spectacle that Jesus is doing here. And one of the things that I found interesting as I was kind of reading through it is he talks about in verse 23, he says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." Now here's the fascinating thing. I love what Jesus says next. He says, "You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former." See, this is the part that a lot of times we forget. That there was this aspect to giving the tenth, to doing that right thing. Jesus says, now the problem is you put that way up on the scale of, just giving 10% is going to be good enough, but you neglect law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Jesus is like, what good is your tithe if you're not doing the more weightier parts of the law? But he doesn't say, so don't forget, just don't bother with those, just do these weighty things. No, he says do both. Just do both. Don't just do one and neglect the other. Do them both. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. And I think that's an important part. I think it's one of the reasons why, as followers of Jesus, we do evaluate what the Old Testament has to say about what righteousness looks like and why that matters. There are some who discount the Old Testament because of what the New Testament has to say. This would be a case where Jesus is saying, no, don't simply let go. I mean, there are things that Jesus takes from the Old Testament and reinforces it. Now, Jesus is our authority in that. He's the one who determines what is weighty and what is not. But when he does add weight to something, we take notice of that, and we say, yeah, that's a truth. That's something that's actually we're bound to because Jesus says so. And so I just think it's an important thing. And if there is a message that you find throughout the Old Testament, it is, do not neglect those who need help. Do not be unfaithful. Don't be unjust towards the people who need justice. And then say, well, I'm good because I do these other parts of the law. That didn't fly in the Old Testament, and it certainly doesn't fly with Jesus. And he is putting his finger right on it. He said, you're doing these things, but you're not doing all those things. So let's get to it. Let's make sure that we practice the latter without neglecting the former. And so I love that part of it. So that's it for today. We will see you tomorrow when we move to day 81 and we go to Matthew chapter 24. Have a good one.